you need a home?" The question that changed a lonely old woman's life. Mrs. Eleanor Hughes lived alone in a small old apartment on the third floor of a quiet building at the edge of the city.
The building had been standing for decades, its paint peeling and bricks slowly turning gray. But it was all Eleanor had known for many years. The elevator rarely worked, so she climbed the stairs every day, carefully holding the rusty railing, feeling the strain in her knees and the ache in her back. Each step reminded her of the years gone by, of her strength slowly fading. Every morning, Eleanor woke up to the same silence that had surrounded her for years. The sunlight would creep through the thin curtains, falling softly on the worn carpet. She would make herself a cup of tea, carefully balancing the cup in her hands, feeling its warmth seep through her fingers. Sitting by the small window, she would watch the city slowly wake up. Cars rushed past, children hurried to school, and neighbors greeted each other with smiles and nods. Eleanor watched them all, but no one stopped for her. She was part of the world, yet apart from it. Her days were quiet and routine, a series of small actions repeated endlessly. She would dust the shelves, water the few plants that still survived, and arrange her photographs of long-gone family gatherings. There were pictures of her late husband, Thomas, smiling in his favorite suit, and their children, now grown and scattered across different cities. But Eleanor often traced her fingers over these photographs, remembering the voices, the laughter, and the warmth she had once known. She remembered the sound of her husband humming in the kitchen and the soft footsteps of her children running down the hallway. Those days felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else. Evenings were the hardest. The sun would set behind the buildings, casting long shadows across her living room. Eleanor would make a simple dinner, often just bread and soup, and eat alone at the small table by the window. She would sometimes talk to herself, recounting the events of the day, answering questions she imagined someone might ask. The silence was heavy, but Eleanor had grown used to it. The walls of her apartment seemed to hold her memories, but they also reminded her of how empty life had become. Despite her solitude, Eleanor maintained her dignity and independence. She was proud of having lived on her own for so many years, even as her body became frail. She still did her shopping, walked to the nearby market, and visited the small park across the street when the weather allowed. She liked watching the children play on the swings, hearing their laughter echo through the air. Their joy reminded her of her own grandchildren whom she hadn't seen in months. She longed to hold them, to hear their stories, and to feel their hugs, but distance and busy lives had created a quiet gap that seemed impossible to bridge. Neighbors noticed her rarely. A few would wave from across the street or nod as she passed, but no one ever stopped to speak at length. Eleanor sometimes felt invisible, like a shadow moving silently through the city.
She had learned to keep her worries and her loneliness to herself, fearing that sharing them might burden others.
But deep inside there was a quiet ache that never left her. She longed for someone to ask about her day, to smile when she smiled, to sit with her during the quiet nights. Sometimes, in the evenings, Eleanor would sit by her window with a notebook in her lap. She wrote small notes, memories, and little messages to herself. "I hope tomorrow will be better," she would write. Or, "I miss laughter in my home." These notes were private, tucked away in the corners of her small apartment, but they helped her feel that someone, anyone, might understand her feelings, even if only she could read them. She also remembered the days when her home had been full of life. When Thomas was alive, their apartment had been bright with laughter and warmth. They had hosted dinners, celebrated birthdays, and welcomed friends who stayed late into the night. Eleanor could remember the smell of her husband's favorite stew, the sound of the radio playing softly, and the happy chatter of their children running through the rooms. Those days had vanished quietly, leaving her with memories that were both sweet and sorrowful.
On certain mornings, Eleanor would hear footsteps in the hallway and hope it was someone coming to visit, only to find it was just a delivery person or another neighbor rushing past.
She often imagined what it would be like to have a companion, someone to share stories with, to laugh at small jokes, and to offer comfort when days felt heavy. But the thought of inviting someone into her life also scared her. She feared rejection and disruption, fearing that the new presence might vanish as quickly as her hope often did. Despite all this, Eleanor carried a small spark of optimism. Fresh, a good cup of tea, the sound of birds outside, the sight of flowers blooming in spring. Every day she would dress carefully, even if she had no visitors, putting on her favorite shawl, smoothing her hair, and tying her shoes with care. But was her way of telling herself that she mattered, that she still had dignity, and that life could hold beauty even in solitude. She also kept a careful routine with her health. Eleanor took her medications on time, checked her blood pressure, and sometimes walked slowly to the park for fresh air. Doctor's visits reminded her of her vulnerability, but they also gave her a sense of control. She wanted to stay strong, not just for herself, but for the memory of her family and the hope that someday life might surprise her. One afternoon, while Eleanor was watering her plants, she noticed a small flyer slipped under her door. It was bright yellow, standing out against the faded carpet outside her apartment. Curiosity stirred inside her, and she picked it up. The flyer spoke about a program for seniors who needed support and a safe place to live. Eleanor read it carefully, her heart beating slightly faster. Breath. She had never considered leaving her apartment, but the idea that someone cared enough to offer help was a new and strange feeling. For hours she held the flyer in her hands, turning it over, reading it again, and thinking about what it meant. Could this be the change she had been waiting for, even without knowing it? The thought both excited and frightened her. She could remain alone, as she always had, or she could take a step towards something unfamiliar, something that might bring companionship and care. The choice weighed heavily on her. But the spark of hope refused to be extinguished. That night, Eleanor sat by her window, looking out at the city lights, thinking of the life she had lived and the life she could still have. She remembered Thomas's gentle words, the laughter of her children, and the comfort of being surrounded by love. A soft ache in her heart reminded her that loneliness was part of her life now. But the flyer hinted that it might not always be this way. Perhaps, she thought, the world still had room for her, even after all these years. As Eleanor turned off the light and lay in her small bed, she felt a strange mixture of anxiety and hope. The room was silent, but her mind was alive with possibilities. Dusk. She wondered if tomorrow might bring someone who would ask about her day, who would smile when she smiled, and who would offer more than just words. A presence, a companion, a connection. The thought lingered in her heart as she drifted into a restless sleep, not knowing that the very next day would bring a question that would change her life forever. The next morning, Eleanor woke up feeling a strange mix of curiosity and unease. She thought about the flyer she had found the day before, wondering what it might mean for her. She dressed carefully, as she always did, choosing her favorite blue cardigan, the one that made her feel just a little brighter even on the grayest days. The small routine gave her comfort, a sense of control, as though by dressing neatly she could prepare herself for whatever might come. She made her usual cup of tea and sat by the window, staring at the city streets below. The sun had just begun to peek over the rooftops, casting a soft glow on the buildings. Children hurried to school, their laughter echoing faintly up to her apartment. Eleanor felt a pang in her heart. She remembered the days when her own children had run through the rooms of her home, shouting and laughing, their excitement filling the air with energy and warmth. Those days were gone, replaced by quiet and empty rooms. Just as she was finishing her tea, a soft knock echoed on her apartment door. Eleanor froze. Visitors were rare, almost unheard of, and a sudden sense of nervousness washed over her. She hesitated for a moment, then carefully stood up, her knees stiff from sitting too long. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the door and opened it. Brie. Standing there was a young man, neatly dressed, with a gentle smile on his face. He held a clipboard in one hand and a small bag in the other. Good morning, ma'am, he said kindly. My name is Daniel. I'm with the Community Support Program. I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I wanted to ask something important. Do you need a home?
Eleanor blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly.
A home? She already had a home, or at least she thought she did. Her apartment, small and worn, had been hers for decades. But the way he asked the question, gentle and caring, something inside her stirred. She looked at him, searching for a hint of jest, but his eyes were serious, full of warmth and sincerity. I'm not sure what you mean, Eleanor said slowly. Her voice was soft, unsure, like the quiet she had grown used to. Daniel nodded as if he understood completely. I mean a place where you can feel safe, cared for, and part of a community. A place where you won't be alone every day, where there's support if you need help with meals, health, or just someone to talk to. I know it might sound unusual, but we've helped many seniors find a new home that makes life easier and more fulfilling. Eleanor's heart pounded. The words sounded like a promise she had longed to hear. Yet the fear of change made her hesitate. She was used to being alone, used to managing by herself, and the thought of leaving her apartment, her memories, her familiar routines, was frightening. She opened her mouth to speak, but found herself at a loss for words. Breath. Daniel seemed to sense her hesitation. He took a step back, giving her space, his voice gentle and patient. You don't have to decide today, he said. I just wanted to ask, and maybe give you some information. You can think about it, talk to your family, and if you're interested, we can help you take the next step. Eleanor looked down at her hands, wringing them together nervously. Memories flooded her mind. Of her husband Thomas cooking in the kitchen, of her children's laughter bouncing off the walls, of quiet evenings spent reading by the lamp. Leaving this place felt like leaving a part of herself behind, but at the same time, she realized how long it had been since she had felt truly connected, truly cared for. May I come in? Daniel asked softly. His tone was respectful, without pressure, as if he understood the weight of the decision he had placed before her. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She stepped aside, allowing him to enter. The apartment felt smaller than usual, cluttered with memories, photographs, and small belongings that told the story of her long life. Daniel walked slowly, looking around without judgment, his eyes kind and attentive. He placed his bag on the table and pulled out some pamphlets. These explain the program, he said. It's not just about a home. It's about companionship, safety, and support. We arrange activities, social gatherings, and even help with medical care if needed. People here are like family, and we'd love for you to be part of it if you feel ready. Eleanor listened carefully, reading the pamphlets and looking at the photographs of smiling seniors sitting together, sharing meals, and enjoying music or games. Her eyes softened. She imagined herself in those pictures, smiling, laughing, feeling included again. The thought was almost overwhelming, stirring emotions she had kept locked away for so long. I don't know. Her voice trembled slightly. I've lived alone for so long. Bus, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I want to leave my home. Daniel nodded again, patient and understanding. It's okay to feel that way, he said. Brace. It's a big change, but sometimes a small step can open a door to something wonderful. You don't have to decide right now. Just know that this option is here for you, and you're welcome to visit, ask questions, or even stay for a trial period. We want you to feel comfortable and safe." Eleanor thought about the long days she had spent alone, the evenings filled with silence, and the ache in her heart for connection. She thought about the flyer, the quiet hope she had felt when she first read it. And now, standing here looking at Daniel, seeing his genuine concern, she realized that perhaps this was the moment she had been waiting for, even without knowing it. She sat down slowly, her hands clutching the pamphlets. I think I might like to visit," she said finally. Her voice was soft, but there was a hint of hope in it. Daniel smiled warmly, his eyes lighting up. "That's wonderful," he said. "We can arrange a visit any time this week. You'll get to see the home, meet some of the residents, and get a feel for the community." "No pressure. Just a chance to see if it feels right for you." Eleanor nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. It was strange, the mixture of fear and excitement that churned inside her. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she was looking forward to something beyond the walls of her apartment. The idea of companionship, of laughter, and of shared moments filled her heart with a warmth she had almost forgotten. As Daniel prepared to leave, he handed her his card and said, "Take your time to think. If you have any questions, call me. I'll be happy to answer anything." Eleanor thanked him, watching as he walked slowly down the hallway, leaving her with a quiet sense of anticipation and nervous hope. For the rest of the day, Eleanor could hardly focus on her usual chores. She found herself daydreaming about the home Daniel had described, imagining sitting with others, sharing stories, and feeling included. She felt a spark she hadn't felt in years, a spark of life, of connection, of possibility. That evening, Eleanor sat by her window, looking out at the city as the sun dipped below the rooftops. The streets were alive with people heading home, children playing, and neighbors chatting. She realized how much she had missed feeling like part of the world, how much she had yearned for a simple connection. And now, for the first time in years, she felt that connection might not be out of reach. But she thought about the question Daniel had asked. Do you need a home? It seemed so simple, yet it carried so much meaning. It was not just about a physical place, but about belonging, care, and companionship. Eleanor felt a tear slip down her cheek, not of sadness, but of hope. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a life that was not defined by loneliness, but by warmth, friendship, and the possibility of new memories. That night, Eleanor lay in bed, unable to sleep, thinking of the visit she might take. She imagined meeting other residents, sharing stories, laughing at small jokes, and feeling the comfort of being part of a community. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The fear of change was still there, but it was joined by a growing excitement, a quiet courage that whispered to her, maybe it was time to step forward. As she drifted into a restless but hopeful sleep, Eleanor felt a quiet sense of anticipation. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew that something important had begun. A simple question, asked with kindness, had opened a door she thought was long closed. And for the first time in a long time, Eleanor felt that life might still have surprises, still have joy, and still have love waiting for her. The morning sunlight spilled softly through the window, and Eleanor sat quietly at her small kitchen table, staring at the flyer Daniel had left with her. Her fingers traced the edges of the paper, and she felt a flutter in her chest that was both nervous and excited. Today was the day she would visit the home Daniel had described. A small voice inside whispered that this might change her life. Yet another voice hesitated, reminding her of the comfort and familiarity of her apartment.
After a deep breath, Eleanor made herself a cup of tea.
She added a little extra sugar, just as she liked it, and sipped slowly, letting the warmth spread through her body. She dressed carefully, choosing a soft green blouse and her favorite cardigan, the one that made her feel calm and confident. She brushed her hair neatly, tied it loosely, and took a moment to steady her hands.
She was about to step into something unknown, and she wanted to feel ready.
When Daniel arrived, he greeted her with the same gentle smile that had made her feel at ease the first time he had knocked on her door. "Good morning, Eleanor," he said warmly. "Are you ready to see the home?" Eleanor nodded, feeling her heart race. The fear was there, as always, but beneath it was a growing excitement she hadn't felt in years. She stepped out of her apartment slowly, Daniel walking beside her. Each step down the hallway was filled with anticipation. The familiar walls of her building felt smaller somehow, and the streets outside seemed full of possibilities.
The car ride was quiet, but Eleanor didn't mind.
She looked out of the window, noticing the trees swaying in the gentle breeze, the children playing on the sidewalks, and neighbors going about their day. Her city, which had seemed dull and lonely, now felt alive and full of stories. She wondered what it would be like to have her own story continue somewhere new, surrounded by people who cared. When they arrived, Eleanor felt a sudden mixture of awe and anxiety. The home was warm and welcoming, with soft sunlight spilling into the courtyard. Flowers bloomed in neatly arranged beds, and birds chirped in the trees. She could hear laughter, soft music, and the gentle murmur of conversation. It was a sound she had almost forgotten, and it filled her with a strange and comforting hope. Daniel led her through the halls, introducing her to some of the residents. By it, an elderly woman smiled at her and said, "Hello, you must be Eleanor. We've been expecting you." The warmth in her voice made Eleanor's heart flutter. Another man, sitting on a bench reading a newspaper, nodded and said, "It's nice to meet you. I hope you enjoy it here."
Eleanor felt a lump in her throat. She was used to polite greetings that ended quickly, with no real connection.
Here, the smiles and words seemed genuine, carrying a kindness that warmed her heart. She realized how long it had been since she had felt truly welcomed, truly seen. Brash. Daniel showed her room, a cozy space with a comfortable bed, a small desk, and a window that looked out onto the courtyard.
It wasn't her apartment, and it wasn't filled with decades of memories, but it was clean, bright, and filled with possibilities.
But Eleanor ran her fingers over the bedspread and smiled softly. This could be a new beginning, she thought. After settling in briefly, Daniel invited her to join a small group in the common room for tea. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, unsure of how she would fit in, but the encouraging nod from Daniel gave her courage. She walked slowly into the room and was greeted with warm smiles from the residents. "Please, Eleanor, have a seat," said a cheerful woman named Margaret. Bus. Eleanor sat down, and soon the room was filled with the sound of gentle conversation. They talked about books, gardens, recipes, and memories from years gone by. Eleanor listened carefully, occasionally sharing a story of her own. She was surprised at how easy it felt to speak, how natural it was to laugh and nod along with others. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt the comfort of companionship. She realized that she had not forgotten how to connect with people, only that she had been isolated for too long.
The laughter of the residents, their gentle teasing, and their shared experiences made her heart feel lighter than it had in decades.
Lunch was a small, communal affair. Eleanor was nervous at first, unsure of what to say or how to eat among strangers. But the staff were kind and patient, guiding her and making her feel included. She tasted the food, simple yet delicious, and felt a warmth spread through her body. It was more than nourishment. It was a reminder that someone cared about her well-being.
After lunch, Eleanor took a walk in the garden with Margaret.
They talked quietly as Eleanor admired the flowers, the neatly trimmed bushes, and the soft chirping of the birds. Margaret shared stories of her own life, of the joy she had found in simple moments, and Eleanor listened with rapt attention. It felt strange and wonderful to have someone to share her thoughts with, to be seen not as a lonely old woman, but as a person with memories, stories, and experiences worth listening to. The afternoon passed quickly. Eleanor joined in a small art activity, painting a simple vase of flowers. Her hands were shaky at first, but as she focused on the colors and shapes, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. One of the residents leaned over and complimented her work, and Eleanor felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Praise, kindness, and encouragement. It had been so long since she had received these things, and she realized how much she had missed them. By evening, Eleanor felt a quiet sense of contentment. She had met more residents, shared stories, laughed, and even sang along softly to a familiar tune played on the piano. Burst. It was a day full of small joys, connections, and the realization that life could still be meaningful and bright, even at her age. As she returned to her room, Eleanor sat by the window, looking out at the courtyard, where children, staff, and residents mingled. She felt a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. The walls of this home seemed alive, filled with laughter, warmth, and life. Her heart felt lighter, her spirit more hopeful. That night, as Eleanor lay in her bed, she thought about the decision that awaited her. She could return to her apartment, to the familiar solitude, or she could take a step into this new home, a place filled with care, companionship, and possibility. The fear was still there. It always would be, but it was joined by a growing excitement, a sense of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel for decades. She thought about Thomas, about her children, and about the life she had lived. Brace. Change was frightening, yes, but it also held the promise of new memories, laughter, and connections. Eleanor realized that her home had been more than just walls and furniture. It had been her memories. Brace. And now, perhaps, she could build new memories somewhere that offered not just safety, but warmth and belonging. Sleep came slowly that night, but when it did, Eleanor dreamed not of loneliness, but of laughter, conversation, and the gentle touch of friendship. She dreamt of sitting in the garden, painting with new friends, and sharing stories that would become part of this new chapter in her life. The fear remained, but it was smaller now, replaced by hope and quiet courage. Eleanor knew that the decision would not be easy. She would have to leave behind the apartment she had called home for decades, the familiar streets she had walked so many times, and the memories that had kept her company in solitude. But she also knew that staying in her apartment meant continuing the same lonely routine, the same quiet ache, and the same longing for connection that had filled her days for too long. The next morning she awoke with a sense of determination. The visit had shown her that life could be different, that kindness and companionship were still possible, and that the fear of change could be met with courage. Eleanor made a small, quiet decision. She would take the step. She would leave her apartment and embrace this new home, knowing that it was never too late to find connection, joy, and care. Daniel returned later that morning to see if she was ready to take the next step. Eleanor smiled softly, a mixture of nervousness and excitement in her eyes. "Yes," she said simply. "I think I'm ready." The words felt powerful, as if speaking them had lifted a weight from her heart. Brasky. Daniel nodded, smiling warmly. "I'm so glad," he said. "You're going to find that this is a place where you can thrive, feel safe, and belong. We'll help you every step of the way." Eleanor packed a small bag with the essentials she would need for her move. She carefully folded her clothes, packed a few photographs, and tucked in the small notebook where she had written her private thoughts. It was not much, but it was enough to carry the memories of her past while making room for the memories of her future. When she stepped out of her apartment one last time, Eleanor paused to look around. The walls, the hallway, and the familiar streets had been part of her life for so long, but now she felt a sense of liberation, a quiet excitement for the unknown. Breath. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of loneliness lift slightly from her shoulders.
As the car drove toward her new home, Eleanor looked out the window with anticipation.
She imagined herself walking through the halls, meeting new friends, sharing stories, and finally feeling part of something larger than herself. She realized that this step, small as it seemed, was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with warmth, laughter, and hope. Eleanor woke early on her first full day in the new home, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The sun streamed through the large window of her room, warming the bedspread and lighting up the small photographs she had brought with her. The apartment she had left behind still lingered in her thoughts, but the fear she had felt before was slowly being replaced by curiosity and hope. Today was the day she would start building a new life. She dressed carefully, choosing a soft yellow cardigan that made her feel cheerful. She brushed her hair, added a small pin that Thomas had given her many years ago, and took a deep breath.
There was a gentle knock on her door. It was Daniel, smiling warmly as always.
"Good morning, Eleanor. Ready to see more of your new home?" Eleanor nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. The hallways were bright and filled with the soft hum of activity. Residents were starting their day. Some were walking with assistants, others chatting quietly in small groups. Eleanor noticed the smiles, the small gestures of kindness, and the sense of calm that seemed to flow through the home. For the first time in years, she felt that she was entering a space where people genuinely cared. Daniel led her to the dining room for breakfast. The room was cheerful, with sunlight bouncing off the walls and tables neatly arranged with colorful flowers. Eleanor was shown to a table where a few residents were already seated. "Good morning!"
"I'm Margaret," said a woman with bright eyes and a warm smile, "and this is George."
"We're so glad you're here." Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then smiled softly. "I'm Eleanor."
It's nice to meet you. Breakfast was simple but delicious. Fresh fruit, warm toast, and soft scrambled eggs. As Eleanor ate, she listened to Margaret and George share stories from their lives.
Eleanor found herself laughing quietly at their small jokes and nodding as they spoke about their daily routines. The warmth of conversation, the ease of sharing experiences, and the simple joy of being included made her heart feel lighter than it had in years. After breakfast, Daniel guided Eleanor through the home, showing her the library, the art room, and the garden. Each space was welcoming and carefully arranged to encourage residents to participate in activities, relax, or simply enjoy a quiet moment. Eleanor's eyes lingered on the garden, where flowers bloomed in vibrant colors and birds flitted from branch to branch. She could imagine herself sitting there with a cup of tea, reading a book, or painting in the sunlight. Later in the morning, Eleanor joined a small group for a gentle exercise session. At first, she was hesitant, worried about keeping up with others, but the instructor was patient, guiding her through slow stretches and encouraging movements. She laughed quietly at her own stiffness and smiled when others praised her effort. It was a small thing, but it reminded her that her body could still move, that she could still participate, and that life still held surprises, even at her age.
After exercise, Eleanor wandered into the common room, where residents were preparing for a small art activity. Paints, brushes, and paper were spread across the tables.
Eleanor felt a flutter of nervousness. She had not painted in years, but she decided to join in. The first brushstrokes felt awkward, but as she focused on the colors and shapes, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. A resident named Lucy leaned over and offered guidance, and soon Eleanor found herself smiling, enjoying the creative process, and even laughing softly at the small mistakes she made. Lunch was a lively affair. Eleanor sat with Margaret, George, and a few new friends. The conversation flowed easily, filled with shared memories, jokes, and gentle teasing. Eleanor felt a joy she had almost forgotten, the simple happiness of being included, of having people listen and respond, of laughing at small things without fear of judgment. She realized that this was more than just a meal. It was a connection, a sense of belonging she had longed for without realizing it. After lunch, Eleanor took a walk in the garden, breathing in the fragrance of blooming flowers. She noticed a small group of residents planting new seeds, and she offered to help. Digging into the soil, planting tiny bulbs, and watering the flowers felt deeply satisfying. But she thought about the care it would take for the plants to grow, and she realized that life was similar. Nurturing small moments, offering attention and love, and watching joy bloom over time.
As the afternoon passed, Eleanor participated in a music session.
Residents gathered in a circle, singing familiar songs, clapping hands and tapping feet to the rhythm. Eleanor's voice was soft at first, but soon she found herself singing along with others, the sound of harmony filling the room. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a warmth in her chest, realizing how much she had missed music, laughter, and the gentle companionship of shared moments. By the evening, Eleanor returned to her room, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She unpacked a few more personal items, arranging them on the shelves and desk. Each object reminded her of the life she had lived, her children, her husband, and the many memories she had cherished. But now she also felt the possibility of new memories forming in this home, filled with warmth, friendship, and care. That night, as Eleanor lay in her bed, she reflected on the day, but she thought about her fears, the hesitation she had felt before taking the step, and the courage that had allowed her to embrace the unknown. For she realized that change was not easy, but it could be beautiful. The home had offered more than safety. It had offered connection, belonging, and the promise of joy. Over the next few days, Eleanor became more comfortable in her new home. She joined daily activities, participated in group discussions, and spent quiet moments reading in the library. She began to notice small gestures of kindness, someone saving her a seat, offering a smile, asking how her day had been. These small acts filled her heart with warmth, and Eleanor began to feel like she truly belonged. She formed a special bond with Margaret, who shared stories from her childhood and offered gentle advice. George became a companion during walks in the garden, sharing jokes and stories that made Eleanor laugh. Lucy guided her through art projects, encouraging Eleanor's creativity and celebrating her successes. Slowly, Eleanor realized that she was no longer alone. The home had become a place where she could live fully, share her experiences, and be part of a community that cared. Weeks passed, and Eleanor found herself looking forward to each day. The mornings were filled with light, conversation, and activity. The afternoons offered quiet moments, opportunities for reflection, and chances to nurture new hobbies. Evenings were warm, filled with shared meals, music, and laughter. Eleanor's heart felt lighter, her spirit more joyful, and her life richer than it had been in decades. One afternoon, as Eleanor sat in the garden, she watched a group of children playing nearby. Their laughter reminded her of her own grandchildren, and she felt a soft ache of longing, but it was accompanied by gratitude. She had found a place where she could be seen, where her stories mattered, and where her presence brought joy to others. She realized that this home had given her not just companionship, but a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. Eleanor also began helping other residents who were new to the home. She shared her experiences, offered guidance, and provided gentle encouragement. The kindness she had received was now something she could pass on, creating a cycle of care and support. Each smile she saw, each small act of gratitude, filled her heart with warmth and reinforced her sense of community. As the weeks turned into months, Eleanor's life transformed completely. The fear of change, the loneliness that had once defined her days, and the isolation of her old apartment faded into memory. She found joy in small moments. Watching the sunrise, tending to the garden, sharing a joke, or listening to someone's story. She discovered that life could still surprise her, still offer beauty, laughter, and connection. One evening, Eleanor sat by her window, looking out at the courtyard where residents and staff mingled. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the flyer, the question Daniel had asked, and the courage she had found to take a step into the unknown.
"Do you need a home?" Daniel had asked. It had seemed simple at the time, but it had changed everything.
Eleanor smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had found more than a home. She had found a place where she was valued, where she belonged, and where her life could continue with meaning and joy. The fear that had once held her back had been replaced by hope, courage, and connection. She realized that it was never too late to embrace life, to seek companionship, and to create new memories that would warm her heart for years to come. That night, as Eleanor lay in bed, she reflected on the transformation she had experienced. She had moved from loneliness to belonging, from fear to courage, and from isolation to connection. Her heart was full, her spirit renewed, and her life rich with possibility. Breaths. She closed her eyes, feeling the comfort of her new home, the warmth of her friends, and the quiet joy of knowing that she was seen, valued, and loved. Eleanor had discovered that a single question, asked with kindness and care, could open a door to a new chapter. She had embraced that opportunity, and in doing so, had found more than a home. She had found life, hope, and the gentle happiness that comes from being part of a community that truly cares. And for the first time in many years, Eleanor slept peacefully, her heart full of warmth, gratitude, and the quiet certainty that life, even at her age, could still be beautiful.